The scorching California sun beat down on Fort Irwin without mercy. Captain James "Iron Jim" Harrington stood atop the observation post, squinting through binoculars at the vast expanse of desert before him. At 58, his weathered face told stories that his mouth rarely did. Deep lines etched around his eyes from years squinting across desert battlefields. A jagged scar ran from his left temple to his cheekbone, a permanent reminder of the day outside Basra when an Iraqi mortar had nearly taken his life. The vast training grounds of the National Training Center sprawled before him, 20 miles of harsh terrain carefully selected to mirror the battlefields of the Middle East. Copper Ridge rose in the distance, its reddish hues shimmering in the heat. This was his domain. For 30 years he had lived and breathed armored warfare, from Cold War standoffs in Germany to the lightning advance across the Iraqi desert in Operation Desert Storm. Harrington lowered the binoculars and wiped sweat from his brow. His fingers brushed against the worn fabric of his cap, feeling the captain's bars he'd worn for longer than most officers. He'd turned down promotion after promotion, preferring to stay where the real work happened, where he could shape young soldiers into warriors who would survive when theory met reality. "Beautiful day for a war, isn't it, sir?" The voice belonged to Sergeant Mike Thompson, Harrington's gunner for the better part of a decade. At 42, Thompson was older than most non-commissioned officers, but his steady hands and uncanny instinct for range estimation made him worth his weight in gold. "Too damn hot," Harrington replied, his voice gravelly from years of shouting orders over the roar of tank engines. "Just like Kuwait in '91, heat plays hell with the thermal sights." Thompson nodded knowingly. Both men had seen their share of combat. Both carried memories they'd never fully shared with anyone who hadn't been there. "Sullivan's boys are setting up on the North Ridge," Thompson said, gesturing toward a distant dust cloud. "Looks like they're positioning for an ambush at Rattlesnake Pass." The mention of Colonel Richard Hawk Sullivan caused Harrington's jaw to tighten almost imperceptibly. Former classmates at West Point, their paths had diverged dramatically over the years. While Harrington had chosen the gritty, hands-on approach of a field officer, Sullivan had climbed the ranks with political savvy and an embrace of every new technology that came along. "Sullivan thinks war can be won with computers and satellites," Harrington muttered. "He's forgotten that at the end of the day, it's still about men with guns facing other men with guns." As if summoned by their conversation, Lieutenant David Parker approached, his youthful face flushed from the heat despite being acclimated to desert conditions from 3 tours in Afghanistan. As Harrington's driver, Parker was responsible for positioning their M1A1 Abrams tank exactly where the captain wanted it, when he wanted it there. "Sir, General Matthews is requesting your presence at the command post," Parker said, standing at parade rest despite the informal setting. His respect for Harrington was evident in his posture. "Said it's about tomorrow's exercise parameters." Harrington nodded grimly. These meetings with brass typically meant one thing: more constraints, more artificial parameters designed to prove whatever point the Pentagon was trying to make this month. Real battle wasn't conducted by committee, but training increasingly was. "Thompson, make sure Tech checks the stabilization system again," Harrington ordered, referring to Staff Sergeant Frank Rodriguez, their maintenance technician. "I don't want any surprises when we hit rough terrain tomorrow." "Already on it, sir," Thompson replied. "Tech's been underneath the beast for the past hour. Says there's nothing wrong, but he's triple-checking anyway." Harrington allowed himself the ghost of a smile. Rodriguez, or Tech, as everyone called him, was a mechanical savant. The 35-year-old could diagnose a tank malfunction by sound alone, often fixing problems before the onboard diagnostic systems even detected them. "Parker, tell the general I'll be there in 10, Harrington said, turning his attention back to Copper Ridge. He needed these last few moments to study the terrain, to let his instincts absorb the contours and shadows that might mean the difference between victory and defeat tomorrow. As Parker departed, Thompson moved closer, lowering his voice. "Word is Sullivan's got some new toys for this exercise. Experimental targeting systems on his Abrams." "Not surprised," Harrington replied, unsurprised. Sullivan had always been first in line for new technology. "Doesn't matter. Fancy gadgets fail, training prevails." Thompson nodded, then hesitated before adding, "The young officers are talking. They think your methods are outdated." He let the word hang in the air, clearly uncomfortable delivering this message, but loyal enough to ensure his captain knew the battlefield dynamics. "Let them talk," Harrington said firmly. "After tomorrow, they'll understand why some lessons don't need updating." 20 minutes later, Harrington strode into the air-conditioned command center. the sudden temperature change sending a chill across his sun-baked skin. The room hummed with activity, junior officers hunched over computerized maps, communications specialists monitoring radio traffic from units deployed across the training area. General William Matthews stood at the central table, his lean frame bent over a topographical display of Copper Ridge. At 62, Matthews was a rarity, a fighting general who had risen through the ranks without losing touch with the realities of combat. His silver hair was cropped short in the same style he'd worn as a lieutenant in Vietnam. "Harrington," Matthews acknowledged without looking up. "Glad you could join us." "Sir." Harrington took his place at the table, immediately noting the presence of Colonel Sullivan on the opposite side. Sullivan's immaculate uniform and polished eagles contrasted sharply with Harrington's weathered battle dress. "We were just discussing the parameters for tomorrow's exercise," Matthews continued. "Colonel Sullivan has proposed some modifications." Sullivan offered a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Just trying to make things more realistic, Jim. The battlefield has evolved. Our training should reflect that." Harrington met his gaze steadily. "What modifications?" Matthews gestured to the digital display. "Colonel Sullivan will be fielding 2 M1A2 Abrams with the new advanced targeting system. Given that potential adversaries are developing similar technologies, it seems appropriate to test our conventional tactics against them." Harrington's eyes narrowed. The M1A2 with ATS was still in development, not yet approved for field exercises. Sullivan had pulled strings, once again using his Pentagon connections to tilt the playing field. "With all due respect, General," Harrington began, choosing his words carefully, "changing parameters the day before the exercise puts my unit at a significant disadvantage. The training value is precisely why we're doing this," Sullivan interrupted smoothly. "In real combat, the enemy doesn't send you their equipment specifications in advance. Adaptation is part of the test." Matthews raised a hand to forestall further argument. "The decision is made, Captain. Your objective remains the same. Secure Copper Ridge and hold it against Colonel Sullivan's counterattack. The only change is in the opposing force's capabilities." Harrington knew a losing battle when he saw one. "Understood, sir." His tone was professional, betraying none of the frustration churning beneath the surface. As the meeting concluded and officers began to disperse, Sullivan approached, maintaining the veneer of professional courtesy that had characterized their relationship for decades. "No hard feelings, Jim," he said, his voice lowered for privacy. "The future of warfare isn't going to wait for those who cling to the past." Harrington met his gaze unflinchingly. "The future is built on the foundations of the past, Rick. Something you seem to have forgotten." Sullivan's smile faltered momentarily. "This exercise isn't just about training, you know. The Pentagon is evaluating the entire tank combat training program. Budget reviews coming up." And there it was, the true agenda. Sullivan wasn't just aiming to win a training exercise. He was positioning himself to influence the future direction of armored warfare doctrine. Harrington's program, the culmination of his life's work, hung in the balance. "May the best tactics win," Harrington said simply, turning to leave. "They always do," Sullivan called after him. "That's the problem for dinosaurs." Outside the command center, the oppressive heat returned like a physical blow. Harrington paused, letting his eyes readjust to the glare, while his mind processed the implications of what he'd just learned. The tank combat training program represented everything he believed in: the primacy of human judgment over technology, the value of hard-earned experience over theoretical knowledge. Lieutenant Sarah Connor was waiting for him, her lean frame silhouetted against the desert landscape. At 30, Connor represented the new generation of tank officers, technically proficient and academically impressive, but with limited combat experience. "How'd it go, sir?" she asked, falling into step beside him. "Sullivan's changed the game," Harrington replied, briefing her on the introduction of the advanced targeting systems. "We'll need to adjust our approach." Connor frowned, processing the information. "The ATS gives them a significant advantage in target acquisition and engagement range. Maybe we should request a delay, develop counter-tactics." Harrington shook his head firmly. "No delays. We adapt and overcome." He stopped walking, turning to face her directly. "This is the reality of combat, Lieutenant. The enemy always has surprises. Our job is to be more creative, more determined, and more disciplined than they are." Connor nodded, but Harrington caught the flicker of doubt in her eyes. Like many young officers, she placed tremendous faith in technology, sometimes at the expense of fundamental combat principles. "Gather the platoon leaders at the motor pool in 30 minutes, he ordered. "We need to revise our strategy." As Connor departed, Harrington felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. 70 men and women would follow his orders tomorrow, trusting in his judgment and experience. It was a trust he had earned through decades of service, through battles won, and more importantly, through the lives saved by his caution when caution was called for, and his boldness when boldness was necessary. The motor pool buzzed with activity as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon. Tank crews performed maintenance checks, topping off fluids and testing systems. The air smelled of diesel fuel, hydraulic fluid, and the distinctive metallic odor of tank armor baking in the sun all day. Harrington's tank, designated Iron Resolve, stood at the center of the formation. Despite being the same model as the others, it somehow projected a sense of character, of personality. The barrel of its 120mm main gun was meticulously clean, its surfaces free of the dust that covered everything else in the training center. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez emerged from beneath the tank, his uniform stained with grease. At the sight of Harrington approaching, he quickly wiped his hands on a rag and straightened up. "She's ready, sir," he reported with quiet confidence. "Stabilization system is optimal. I've tuned the engine for maximum torque in the ridge terrain." Harrington nodded appreciatively. "Good work, Tech. Tomorrow's going to test everything we've got." Rodriguez's expression grew serious. "Word is Sullivan's boys have some new toys." "They do," Harrington confirmed, "but toys break. Skill doesn't." This simple affirmation seemed to satisfy Rodriguez, who nodded and returned to his work. The bond between a tank commander and his crew was special, built on mutual trust and respect. Harrington had served with Thompson and Rodriguez through 2 combat deployments. They could communicate with glances and gestures when radio silence was necessary, anticipating each other's needs in the confined space of the tank. Parker was newer to the team, but had proven his worth in Afghanistan, demonstrating an almost supernatural ability to navigate treacherous terrain while keeping the tank's frontal armor oriented toward potential threats. By the time the platoon leaders assembled, Harrington had formulated the outline of a new approach. The men and women gathered around a tactical map spread across the hood of a Humvee, their faces serious in the fading light. "Sullivan's force will have enhanced targeting capabilities," Harrington began without preamble. "Their effective engagement range will exceed ours by up to 1,500 meters. This means we cannot win in a conventional force encounter on open terrain." He traced a finger along the contours of Copper Ridge. "Therefore, we will not give them such an encounter. Instead of approaching from the south as planned, we'll split our force into 3 elements." He indicated positions on the map. "Alpha will create a diversion here, drawing Sullivan's attention, while Bravo and Charlie elements navigate these ravines to approach from the east and west simultaneously." Lieutenant Connor studied the map with a furrowed brow. "Sir, those ravines are barely wide enough for tanks. If we're detected while in the channels, we'll be sitting ducks." "That's why we move at night," Harrington explained. "We'll be in position before dawn, while Sullivan's force is still oriented toward a southern approach." The gathered officers exchanged glances, the audacity of the plan sinking in. Captain Michael Reynolds, commander of Bravo Company, voiced the concern on everyone's mind. "That's less than 12 hours from now, sir. The terrain reconnaissance alone has already been done," Harrington interrupted, pulling out a worn paper map from his pocket. "These ravines don't appear on the current satellite imagery because they're usually filled with sand. But after the flash flood last month, they've been cleared out. I surveyed them myself last week." This revelation silenced the objections. Harrington had been planning for contingencies none of them had considered, demonstrating the foresight that had kept him alive through decades of combat. "Any other questions?" Harrington asked, looking at each face in turn. Connor spoke up again. "Sir, the night approach negates most of Sullivan's technological advantage. But what about when daylight comes? The ATS includes thermal imaging that will cut through any smokescreen we deploy." Harrington allowed himself a small smile. "Which is why we won't rely on smoke. We'll rely on the sun." He pointed to the eastern ridge. "Sullivan's force will be facing directly into the rising sun when we launch our attack. Even the best thermal imaging systems can be overwhelmed by the right conditions." The briefing continued for another 30 minutes, with Harrington addressing each concern and contingency. When it concluded, the officers dispersed with renewed confidence, impressed by their commander's thoroughness and creativity. As twilight deepened into night, Harrington returned to his quarters, a Spartan room that reflected his no-frills approach to life. A single photograph stood on the metal desk, showing a younger Harrington with his tank crew in the desert outside Basra. 4 men stood proudly before their tank, arms around each other's shoulders, faces streaked with dust, but smiling with the relief of survivors. Harrington was the only one still alive. The memory of that day remained razor-sharp despite the passing years. A routine patrol turned deadly when his tank rounded a corner in a small village and rolled directly into an ambush. Rocket-propelled grenades screaming through the air, the terrible sound of one impacting the tank's side armor. The commander's hatch flying open as Specialist Jenkins attempted to operate the .50 caliber machine gun, only to be cut down by sniper fire. Harrington had pulled Jenkins back inside, but it was too late. The young soldier died in his arms, eyes wide with shock and incomprehension. Outside, Lieutenant Brooks and Corporal Martinez had been caught in the open when a second RPG hit their Humvee escort vehicle. The official report called Harrington's actions heroic. He had maneuvered the damaged tank to provide cover for the wounded, calling in air support that ultimately drove off the attackers. 3 silver stars were awarded posthumously. Harrington received the Bronze Star in the weight of guilt that came with surviving when his men didn't. A soft knock on the door pulled him from the darkness of memory. "Enter," he called, straightening in his chair. It was Thompson holding a satellite phone with a grave expression. "Sir, it's a call from Germany, military hospital in Landstuhl." Harrington felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. His son, James Jr., was deployed with the 1st Armored Division near the Polish border, a promising lieutenant following in his father's footsteps, though their relationship had grown strained over the years. Too many missed birthdays, too many school events sacrificed on the altar of duty. He took the phone, his hands steady though his heart raced. "Captain Harrington speaking." The voice on the other end was clinical, professional. A doctor explaining that Lieutenant James Harrington Jr. had been severely injured during a training accident. A tank had overturned on treacherous terrain. Internal bleeding, surgery scheduled for the morning. Conditions serious but stable. "Can I speak with him?" Harrington asked, his voice betraying none of the turmoil beneath. "He's sedated in preparation for surgery, sir," the doctor replied, "but he asked that you be notified. He also said—" There was a pause on the line. "He said to tell you the old man was right about the terrain guide wheels. I'm not sure what that means." Harrington closed his eyes briefly. Years ago, he had warned his son about the importance of checking the tension on the terrain guide wheels of tanks operating in European conditions, where mud could build up and affect tracking. It was a small detail, the kind that didn't appear prominently in technical manuals, but was passed down from experienced tankers to novices. "Thank you, doctor. Please update me after the surgery." Harrington provided his contact information, then ended the call. Thompson had remained by the door, a silent witness to his commander's controlled reaction. "Bad news, sir. Junior's been injured. Tank accident in Germany." Harrington's tone was flat, factual. "Jesus," Thompson breathed. "Is he going to be okay?" "Surgery tomorrow morning. They think so." Harrington set the satellite phone on the desk with deliberate care. "I should be there." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. The exercise tomorrow was crucial not just for Harrington's reputation, but for the future of the training program he had built. Dozens of careers would be affected by its outcome. Thompson understood the dilemma immediately. "Sir, no one would question if you left tonight. Family comes first." Harrington looked at the photograph on his desk. "Does it, Mike? I've been saying that for 30 years, while missing every important moment in my son's life." He shook his head slowly. "And now he's lying in a hospital because I wasn't there to teach him properly." "With all due respect, sir, that's not fair to either of you," Thompson countered with the frankness of a longtime confidant. "Lieutenant Harrington is a grown man who made his own choice to follow in your footsteps. And from what I hear, he's damn good at it." Harrington considered this, wanting to believe it. "The doctor said he's stable. The surgery isn't until morning." Thompson nodded, sensing his commander working through the decision. "And if you left now, Sullivan wins by default. Everything you've built gets dismantled without even a fight." "This isn't about Sullivan," Harrington said sharply, though they both knew that wasn't entirely true. "Of course not, sir," Thompson backpedaled diplomatically. "It's about the 70 men and women who are counting on your leadership tomorrow, and the hundreds more who will be trained under this program in the years to come." Harrington stood and moved to the window, looking out at the desert night. Stars blazed overhead in the clear air, countless points of light in the vast darkness. Somewhere on the other side of the world, his son lay wounded, perhaps calling for a father who had always put duty first. The satellite phone seemed to weigh a ton as he picked it up again. "I need to make another call." Thompson nodded and quietly left the room, closing the door behind him. Harrington dialed a number from memory, waiting through several rings before a gruff voice answered. "Matthews. General, it's Harrington. I've just received word that my son has been seriously injured in Germany. He's going into surgery tomorrow morning." There was a momentary silence on the line. "I'm sorry to hear that, Jim. Do you need transport to Ramstein?" This was the opening, the perfect excuse to extract himself from tomorrow's exercise without losing face. All he had to do was say yes. "No, sir," Harrington heard himself say. "Junior's in good hands, and the surgery isn't until tomorrow evening their time." It was a small lie, the doctor had said morning. "I'd like to proceed with the exercise as planned." Another pause. "Are you certain, Captain? No one would question your priorities in this situation." "I'm certain, sir. I've spoken with my son's doctors." Another lie. "He'd be the first to insist I finish what I've started here." "Very well," Matthews said, his tone suggesting both approval and concern. "Keep me updated on his condition." "Yes, sir. Thank you." After ending the call, Harrington sat motionless, questioning his decision. Had he made the right choice, or simply the familiar one? The choice that put duty above family yet again? The doubts lingered as he reviewed the battle plans one final time before trying to sleep. Outside his window, the desert had cooled dramatically, a reminder of the extreme conditions they would face tomorrow. His thoughts drifted to Sullivan and his technological advantages, to his injured son, to the men who had died under his command in Iraq. Sleep came reluctantly, in fits and starts, punctuated by vivid dreams. Tanks burning against a desert sky. His son calling for help from inside a twisted wreck of metal. Sullivan standing over a map, moving pieces that represented men's lives with casual indifference. When Harrington awoke at 0400, his uniform was damp with sweat despite the room's coolness. He dressed methodically, each movement precise from decades of pre-dawn preparations for battle. The weight of his decisions pressed down on him, but years of command had taught him to function despite such pressure. The motor pool was already active when he arrived, tanks rumbling to life in the darkness. Headlights were kept off, crews working by red-filtered flashlights that wouldn't ruin their night vision. The quiet efficiency of the operation spoke to the quality of training these soldiers had received. Thompson appeared at his side, offering a steaming cup of coffee. "All units report ready, sir. Fuel topped off, ammunition loaded." Training rounds, of course, sophisticated laser simulators that registered hits and damage without actual projectiles, but loaded and ready nonetheless. "Alpha Company in position?" Harrington asked, sipping the strong black coffee gratefully. "Yes, sir. Captain Lewis reports they're hull down on the southern approach. Exactly as planned. Bravo and Charlie are forming up now for the ravine insertion." Harrington nodded, scanning the bustling activity around them. His gaze fell on Lieutenant Connor, who was briefing her platoon leaders with animated gestures. Her confidence seemed to have returned overnight, a good sign. "Time to mount up," Harrington said, draining the last of his coffee. Iron resolve waited for him, its massive silhouette dark against the star-filled sky. Rodriguez had already completed the pre-operation checks, and Parker sat ready in the driver's compartment. Thompson would take his position at the gunner station once they were underway. As Harrington approached, he ran his hand along the tank's armored flank, a gesture that was part greeting, part superstition. Every tank commander developed personal rituals over time. Some were practical, others purely psychological, but all served to prepare the mind for the controlled chaos of battle. Climbing up to the commander's hatch, Harrington settled into the familiar confined space of the turret. The interior of a tank was an environment few civilians could imagine enduring for hours on end, hot, cramped, and noisy, with limited visibility. Yet to those who mastered it, a tank became an extension of themselves, a 30-ton manifestation of their will. "Intercom check," Harrington said, adjusting his headset. "Driver ready," Parker responded immediately. "Gunner ready," Thompson confirmed. "Tech ready," Rodriguez added from his position. "Startup procedure complete," Parker reported. "Engine nominal, all systems green." Harrington keyed his radio to the command frequency. "All elements. This is Ironclad 6. Radio check, over." The responses came in quick succession, each unit reporting ready status. The plan was in motion, dozens of moving parts coordinating toward a single objective. It was the kind of complex operation where experience made the crucial difference between success and failure. Ironclad elements, begin movement. Execute Phase 1, Harrington ordered, signaling Parker to advance. The massive tank lurched forward, its tracks clattering against the hard-packed desert soil. Around them, other tanks began moving as well, forming into the predetermined formations for their night march. Harrington stood in the commander's cupola, head and shoulders exposed to the cool night air, using his natural night vision rather than relying solely on the tank's optical systems. The tank column moved at a deliberate pace, careful to maintain proper spacing in the darkness. Their route would take Bravo and Charlie companies through the eastern ravine system, a circuitous approach that added miles to their journey but offered concealment from Sullivan's forward observers. Copper Ridge loomed ahead, its silhouette barely visible against the night sky. Somewhere on its slopes, Sullivan's forces waited, confident in their technological edge, perhaps expecting a conventional assault at dawn. The element of surprise was Harrington's only advantage, and he intended to leverage it fully. As they reached the entrance to the ravine system, Harrington ordered the column to halt. Scout elements moved forward on foot, confirming that the narrow passage was indeed navigable for the tanks. After several tense minutes, the scouts returned with confirmation. "Ravine is clear, sir," reported the lead scout. "Tight in places, but passable. No sign of enemy sensors or observation posts." Harrington nodded, unsurprised. These ravines didn't appear on current maps, and Sullivan's reliance on satellite data and drone reconnaissance meant he likely remained unaware of their existence. It was a small advantage, but in battle, small advantages often prove decisive. "Bravo Company, take point," Harrington ordered. "Charlie Company, maintain 500-meter interval. Keep radio discipline, transmit only if absolutely necessary." The column resumed movement, now threading into the narrow confines of the ravine. The walls rose steeply on either side, sometimes towering 20 or 30 feet above the tanks. In places, the passage narrowed to just barely wider than the tanks themselves, requiring precise driving to avoid becoming wedged between the rock walls. Parker demonstrated his skill at the controls, guiding Iron Resolve through the treacherous terrain with confidence. The tank swayed and pitched as it navigated uneven ground, but never lost momentum. Behind them, the rest of the column followed in single file, maintaining proper spacing despite the challenging conditions. For 2 hours, they crawled through the ravine system, the silence broken only by the rumble of engines and the occasional metallic squeal of tracks adjusting to the terrain. The eastern horizon remained dark, though the stars overhead had begun to fade, a sign that dawn approached. Harrington checked his watch. 0545. They were behind schedule but still had time to reach their positions before Sullivan's expected movement at first light. He allowed himself a moment of cautious optimism. So far, the plan was working. Then came the call that changed everything. "Ironclad 6, this is Scout 3, came the urgent whisper over the radio. "Enemy patrol spotted, 200 meters north of ravine exit point. Appears to be a security element, 4 vehicles, dismounted troops with thermal equipment." Harrington tensed. Sullivan had been more thorough than expected, placing security elements to cover even unlikely approaches. "Can we bypass them?" "Negative, sir. They're directly on our exit route. No alternate path for vehicles." Decision time. They could retreat and seek another route, but that would mean abandoning the entire plan. They could attempt to remain hidden and hope the patrol moved on, but with thermal imaging equipment, detection was almost certain once they drew closer. "Hold position," Harrington ordered. "I'm coming forward." Leaving Thompson in command of Iron Resolve, Harrington dismounted and moved swiftly along the column, joining the scout element at the forward edge of their position. Using night vision binoculars, he observed the enemy patrol, noting their positioning and equipment. 4 Humvees with roof-mounted sensors, probably advanced thermal imaging systems. A dozen soldiers patrolling on foot, their movements suggesting a routine security sweep rather than a response to detected threats. They were thorough but not alarmed. Not yet. Harrington weighed his options. Direct engagement would alert Sullivan to their position and approach, sacrificing surprise. Retreat meant certain failure. A diversion might work, drawing the patrol away long enough for the column to slip past, but any such action risked detection. As he considered these options, an unexpected sound cut through the pre-dawn stillness, the distinctive whop-whop-whop of helicopter rotors, growing rapidly louder. "Take cover," Harrington hissed, pressing himself against the ravine wall as a spotlight suddenly blazed from overhead. sweeping the desert floor near the ravine entrance. A voice boomed from a loudspeaker. "Attention all units, exercise pause. Repeat, exercise pause. All elements maintain current positions. This is not part of the exercise." Harrington recognized General Matthews' voice. Something had happened, something significant enough to halt a major training operation already in progress. His first thought was of his son, and a cold dread settled in his stomach. The helicopter circled once, then settled onto a flat area near the ravine entrance. As the rotor slowed, a figure jumped down and jogged toward the ravine, escorted by two of Sullivan's security patrol soldiers. It was Captain Reynolds from Bravo Company, moving with urgency. "Captain Harrington, General Matthews needs you at the command center immediately, sir. It's about your son." The world seemed to stop for a moment. Harrington had known this was a possibility when he'd chosen to continue with the exercise. Yet the reality hit him with unexpected force. "What's happened?" he managed to ask, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. "I don't know the details, sir," Reynolds replied. "Just that it's urgent, and the general has ordered immediate transport for you to Landstuhl." Harrington nodded, decision made instantly. "Thompson," he called over the radio, "take command of the company. Continue with the operation as planned." "Sir?" Thompson's voice betrayed his surprise. "Are you sure?" "Completely sure," Harrington confirmed. "Sullivan doesn't know about our approach. You have the element of surprise and a solid plan. Execute it." "Yes, sir," Thompson responded after a brief hesitation. "Good luck with your son." Harrington turned to Reynolds. "Tell the men I expect a full report on how they kicked Sullivan's ass when I get back." "Yes, sir," Reynolds replied with a hint of a smile despite the circumstances. As Harrington jogged toward the waiting helicopter, his mind raced with possibilities. None of them good. The military didn't halt major exercises and arrange emergency transport unless the situation was critical. The doctor had said Junior was stable, but conditions could change rapidly with internal injuries. General Matthews himself was waiting in the helicopter, his expression grave as Harrington climbed aboard. "Jim," he said, raising his voice over the sound of the rotors spooling up again. "We just received word from Landstuhl. Junior's condition has deteriorated. They're taking him into surgery now." The helicopter lifted off, banking sharply as it turned toward the distant airfield, where a transport plane waited to take Harrington across the ocean. Below, the tanks of his command continued their advance through the ravine, now under Thompson's leadership. The exercise would continue without him. As the desert landscape fell away beneath them, Harrington found himself torn between two worlds. Behind him lay the culmination of his professional life's work, the validation of principles he had lived by for decades. Ahead lay the son he had too often neglected in service to those same principles. Sullivan's words from the previous day echoed in his mind. This exercise isn't just about training. The Pentagon is evaluating the entire tank combat training program. Without Harrington's leadership, would the program survive? Without a father's presence, would his son? The helicopter crested Copper Ridge, and Harrington caught a glimpse of Sullivan's forces arrayed in defensive positions, unaware of the unconventional attack about to hit their flanks. Thompson was more than capable of executing the plan, but would it be enough against Sullivan's technological advantages? Then the ridge fell behind them, and Harrington turned his gaze forward. For once in his long career, duty would have to wait. Some battles were more important than others. The rising sun broke over the eastern horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues of red and gold. A new day had begun, bringing with it challenges Harrington hadn't anticipated and choices he never wanted to make. Whatever happened next, nothing would be the same. As the helicopter sped toward the airfield, Harrington thought of his tank crews advancing through the ravines, of Thompson stepping up to command, of Sullivan waiting confidently with his advanced technology, and most of all, of his son fighting for his life in a hospital bed thousands of miles away. Some wars were fought with tanks and guns, others with surgeons and medicine. Both required courage, determination, and the will to prevail against the odds. Harrington had trained his entire life for the former. Now he would face the latter, armed with nothing but hope and the iron resolve that had defined his career. The battle for Copper Ridge would be decided without him. The battle for his son's life was just beginning. Sergeant Mike Thompson stood in the commander's cupola of iron resolve, the responsibility of command settling on his shoulders like a physical weight. Through his night vision goggles, he watched the helicopter carrying Captain Harrington disappear over the ridge, its running lights fading into the pre-dawn darkness. The unexpected change of command left him with 70 men and women under his authority and an audacious battle plan to execute. "Orders, Sergeant," Lieutenant Parker asked from the driver's compartment below, his voice steady despite the uncertainty of the moment. Thompson took a deep breath, centering himself. "We proceed as planned. The captain would expect nothing less." He switched to the company frequency. "All elements, Ironclad 5. Captain Harrington has been called away on a family emergency. I am assuming command. Mission continues as briefed. Acknowledge." The acknowledgments came in sequence, professional and crisp, though Thompson detected notes of concern in some voices. The absence of Harrington on this crucial day was unsettling for the entire unit. The captain's presence had been their constant through countless exercises and real-world deployments. "Bravo Company, advance to Phase Line Alpha and hold for Charlie Company to complete passage," Thompson ordered, settling into the rhythm of command. "Scout elements maintain forward security. Report any contact immediately." The tank column resumed its careful progress through the ravine system. Thompson checked his watch. 0603. First light was breaking over the eastern horizon. According to the intelligence briefing, Sullivan's forces would begin their daily security patrols at 0630, expanding outward from their defensive positions atop Copper Ridge. The narrow window for achieving surprise was closing rapidly. Rodriguez shifted in his station, checking the tank's systems with even more thoroughness than usual. "System diagnostics complete, all green," he reported, his voice betraying his concern about the captain's absence. "He'll be back," Thompson said, correctly reading the technician's mood. "His son needs him now. Our job is to make sure he has something to come back to." Rodriguez nodded, refocusing on his duties. The bond between a tank crew was something civilians could never fully understand, a brotherhood forged through shared danger and absolute interdependence. Each man's life rested in the hands of the others, creating a trust that transcended normal relationships. The column emerged from the ravine into a shallow depression flanked by low hills. Dawn painted the landscape in shades of orange and purple, the harsh terrain softened momentarily by the gentle morning light. Thompson consulted his map, confirming their position. "Phase Line Alpha reach," he reported to the company net. "Bravo, deploy in screening formation. Charlie, advance to Phase Line Bravo and prepare for assault positions. Alpha Company should be initiating their diversion in 7 minutes. Lieutenant Connor's voice came over the radio. "Ironclad 5, this is Charlie 6. Be advised, dust clouds sighted on the northern approach. Possible enemy movement, over." Thompson raised his binoculars, scanning the indicated direction. A faint haze hung in the air, suggesting vehicles moving at speed. Sullivan was being proactive, sending out patrols earlier than expected. "Charlie 6, hold position," Thompson ordered. "All elements maintain concealment. Let them pass." The minutes ticked by with excruciating slowness as the patrol approached. 4 Humvees moved in standard reconnaissance formation, maintaining good dispersion as they swept the perimeter of Sullivan's defensive position. Through his binoculars, Thompson could see roof-mounted sensor packages, the latest generation of multispectral imaging systems designed to detect everything from heat signatures to radio emissions. "Electronic silence," Thompson ordered over the command net. "Minimum power systems only." The tanks of Bravo and Charlie companies powered down to their lowest operational states, reducing their electronic and thermal signatures. It was a technique Harrington had developed during Desert Storm, when Iraqi forces had occasionally possessed superior night vision capabilities. Technology could be defeated by disciplined tactics. The patrol came within 500 meters, close enough that Thompson could see individual soldiers scanning the terrain from the Humvee turrets. One vehicle paused, its sensor package rotating slowly toward their position. Thompson held his breath, one hand poised over the radio to order immediate action if they were detected. After an agonizing 30 seconds, the Humvee resumed its patrol route, moving away from their position and continuing along the perimeter. Thompson exhaled slowly, realizing he had been holding his breath. "They're using standard patrol patterns," he noted to Parker and Rodriguez. "Sullivan's confident we're coming from the south, just as planned." Rodriguez grinned. "The captain's going to be sorry he missed this." "Don't celebrate yet," Thompson cautioned. "We still have to get within engagement range without being detected." The sky brightened steadily as dawn gave way to early morning. In the distance, Thompson could make out the distinctive silhouette of Copper Ridge, its steep approaches offering perfect defensive positions for Sullivan's force. Intelligence suggested he had deployed his 12 tanks in Hull down positions along the ridgeline, maximizing their protection while maintaining clear fields of fire across the desert approaches. A sudden crackle of radio traffic broke the silence. All ironclad elements. This is Alpha 6. Beginning diversionary action in 1 minute. Stand by. Thompson checked his watch again. 0628. Right on schedule. Captain Lewis would lead Alpha Company in a feint from the south, making enough noise to draw Sullivan's attention while keeping just beyond effective engagement range of the advanced targeting systems. All Bravo and Charlie elements. Final preparations, Thompson ordered. Weapons hot. Combat systems to full power on my mark. The subtle change in Iron Resolve's engine note told him Parker had positioned his hand over the power management controls, ready to bring the massive war machine to full combat readiness in seconds. Throughout the formation, other crews were doing the same, the atmosphere charged with the controlled tension that preceded action. In the distance, a rumble of tank engines grew steadily louder as Alpha Company began their advance. Thompson imagined Sullivan's reaction. The expected attack, coming from the expected direction, but strangely obvious. The captain would be suspicious, wondering what Harrington was planning, but his technological advantage would give him confidence. 3, 2, 1, mark, Thompson counted down. All systems to combat power. Advance to phase line Charlie. Iron Resolve systems surged to life, displays illuminating and stabilization gyros spinning up to operational speeds. The engine's rumble deepened as additional power flowed through the drivetrain. Around them, the other tanks of Bravo Company did the same, their formation tightening as they moved from concealment toward their assault positions. The radio crackled again. Contact! Contact! Alpha Company engaging enemy elements on the southern approach. The sounds of simulated combat drifted across the desert, the distinctive reports of tank guns punctuated by the chatter of machine gun fire. Sullivan had taken the bait, concentrating his attention on the southern approach, where he expected Harrington's main force. Driver, advance, Thompson ordered. Standard combat speed. Parker responded immediately, guiding the 60-ton behemoth forward with surprising grace. Iron Resolve accelerated smoothly, leading Bravo Company toward the eastern flank of Copper Ridge. 2 kilometers to the west, Charlie Company would be making a similar approach, creating a 3-pronged attack that would force Sullivan to divide his attention. The plan was working perfectly, perhaps too perfectly. Ironclad 5, this is Scout 2, came an urgent call. Enemy QRF deploying from northern positions. 4 tanks moving fast toward your approach vector. Thompson processed this information quickly. Sullivan had held a quarter of his force in reserve, a wise precaution that Harrington had anticipated. But they were moving to intercept Bravo Company specifically, suggesting they somehow knew about the eastern approach. Change of plans, Thompson announced to the company net. Bravo Company, deploy in battle line, oriented northeast. Prepare to engage QRF elements. Charlie Company, accelerate your approach. We need to hit Sullivan's main body before he can reposition to meet both threats. As Iron Resolve crested a small rise, Thompson got his first clear view of the enemy quick reaction force. 4 M1A2 Abrams tanks moving in combat formation, closing the distance rapidly. Through his binoculars, he could make out the enhanced sensor packages mounted on their turrets, the visible manifestation of the technological advantage Sullivan had arranged for himself. Gunner, identify lead target, Thompson ordered, dropping down into the commander's station and closing the hatch. Inside the turret, displays showed the tactical situation in digital clarity, sensor feeds providing information from every direction. Target identified, Rodriguez reported, his voice taking on the focused calm of combat. Range 2,800 meters. Outside optimal engagement parameters with standard targeting. Thompson nodded grimly. This was the challenge they had anticipated. The advanced targeting systems on Sullivan's tanks extended their effective range by nearly a kilometer, allowing them to engage while remaining safely outside the range of conventional Abrams tanks. Driver, maximum speed, close the distance, Thompson ordered. All Bravo Victors, advance at speed. We need to get inside their minimum effective range. It was a dangerous gambit. Crossing open ground against an enemy with superior range meant absorbing hits without being able to return effective fire. In a real battle, it would be potentially suicidal. But Harrington had taught them that sometimes the unexpected move was the only one that offered a chance of success. Iron Resolve surged forward, accelerating to nearly 40 miles per hour across the relatively flat terrain. The other tanks of Bravo Company followed suit, spreading into an extended battle line that would complicate enemy targeting while maximizing their own firepower when they came into range. Enemy lead elements firing, Rodriguez reported tensely. Targeting systems indicate incoming. Thompson braced himself, though there would be no physical impact from the training system's simulated hits. The tank's computer would assess damage based on hit location and angle, potentially killing the vehicle or degrading its capabilities to simulate battle damage. Hit registered on Tank 3, came the report from elsewhere in the formation. Mobility kill, they're falling behind. A second later, another call. Tank 7 hit. Catastrophic damage simulated, they're out of action. 2 tanks lost, and they hadn't even closed to effective firing range yet. Thompson knew they needed a new approach, quickly. All Bravo elements deploy smoke, maximum coverage, and he ordered. Driver, adjust course 15 degrees north. Let's use that depression for cover. Parker responded immediately, veering the tank toward a shallow wadi that offered some concealment from direct fire. Around them, the remaining tanks of Bravo Company deployed smoke grenades, filling the air with thick, obscuring clouds that would disrupt visual targeting systems. But Sullivan's advanced systems weren't limited to visual spectrum. Another hit, reported Tank 4. They're tracking through the smoke somehow. Thompson considered their options. The smoke would provide only temporary concealment at best. They needed to close the distance rapidly or find another way to neutralize Sullivan's range advantage. Ironclad 5, this is Charlie 6. Lieutenant Connor's voice came over the command net. We're in position on the western approach. Sullivan's main body is fully engaged with Alpha Company to the south. His rear is exposed. Thompson made a quick decision. Charlie 6, initiate your attack immediately. Draw away those QRF elements if possible. Bravo Company, we're going to break contact and loop north, then approach from behind the QRF once they turn to face Charlie. It was a modification of Harrington's original plan, adapting to the unexpected QRF deployment. Thompson hoped it would work. The entire exercise might hinge on the next few minutes. Iron Resolve raced through the smoke screen, changing direction to move parallel to the enemy force rather than directly toward it. The other tanks of Bravo Company followed, maintaining formation despite the limited visibility. It was a testament to their training and the quality of their crews. The QRF commander reacted predictably, adjusting his force's direction to maintain engagement with Bravo Company. But then reports began coming in of Charlie Company's attack on Sullivan's main position, creating the divided attention that Harrington had intended all along. QRF elements changing direction, Rodriguez reported, monitoring the tactical display. They're turning to reinforce the main defensive position. Thompson allowed himself a tight smile. Perfect. Driver, bring us around. All Bravo elements prepare to engage QRF from the rear as they respond to Charlie Company. The maneuver worked brilliantly. As Sullivan's QRF pivoted to respond to the unexpected threat from Charlie Company, they exposed their more vulnerable rear armor to Bravo Company's approach. When the smoke cleared, Thompson found his force perfectly positioned to exploit this vulnerability. All Bravo victors, engage targets of opportunity, he ordered, designating the nearest enemy tank for Rodriguez. Gunner, target lead vehicle, center mass. Target acquired, Rodriguez confirmed, firing. The tank's laser designator activated, simulating the firing of a 120mm round. Simultaneously, the other tanks of Bravo Company engaged as well, creating a devastating crossfire that would have shredded the enemy force in a real battle. Hit confirmed on lead vehicle, Rodriguez reported with satisfaction. Catastrophic kill simulated. One after another, the tanks of Sullivan's QRF registered critical hits, their computers simulating the damage they would have sustained. Within minutes, all 4 were neutralized, their crews forced to acknowledge the simulation of their destruction by popping smoke grenades to indicate they were out of the exercise. Bravo Company, regroup and advance toward the main objective, Thompson ordered, his confidence growing. Charlie 6, status report. Engaged with the main body, Connor replied, the sound of simulated combat audible in the background. We've drawn significant attention, but they're well positioned. We're taking heavy simulated casualties. Thompson consulted the tactical display. Charlie Company had succeeded in their mission of drawing Sullivan's attention, but they were now caught in a difficult position, engaging a superior force from disadvantageous terrain. Meanwhile, Alpha Company continued to press from the south, maintaining pressure but unable to make significant gains against the well-prepared defenses. The moment of decision had arrived. Thompson could continue with Harrington's original plan, bringing Bravo Company to support Charlie's Western assault, or he could improvise, seeking another approach that might offer a greater chance of success. All ironclad elements, this is 5, he announced after a moment's consideration. New plan, Alpha Company, increase pressure from the south. Charlie Company, begin tactical withdrawal to Rally Point Echo, drawing enemy elements with you if possible. Bravo Company will advance directly toward the command post from the northeast. It was a bold modification of Harrington's plan, focusing their strongest remaining force on what intelligence suggested was the least defended approach. If Sullivan had committed too many resources to countering the southern and western threats, the northeastern approach might be vulnerable. Understood, Captain Lewis acknowledged from Alpha Company. Increasing pressure now. Charlie 6 copies, Connor responded, beginning tactical withdrawal. Iron Resolve led Bravo Company's advance, moving swiftly across the desert terrain toward the northeastern slope of Copper Ridge. Thompson stood in the commander's cupola again, scanning the ridgeline for any sign of defensive positions. So far, nothing was visible, but Sullivan was too experienced to leave any approach completely undefended. Contact front, Rodriguez called out suddenly. Single vehicle, approximately 2,000 meters, moving fast. Thompson raised his binoculars, focusing on the indicated direction. A lone Humvee was racing down from the ridge, dust billowing behind it. Not a combat threat, but potentially a forward observer that could direct fire onto their position. Gunner, engage with Cokes, Thompson ordered, designating the lighter vehicle as a target for the tank's coaxial machine gun rather than the main gun. Against such a target, the 7.62mm would be more than sufficient. Rodriguez complied, the laser designator simulating a burst of machine gun fire toward the approaching vehicle. The Humvee swerved erratically, then ground to a halt, a blue smoke grenade indicating that the simulation had registered a mobility kill. Continue advance, Thompson ordered, scanning the ridgeline with renewed intensity. The single Humvee suggested a hasty response to their approach, possibly indicating that Sullivan had indeed left this sector relatively undefended. As they closed to within a kilometer of the base of the ridge, Thompson spotted movement along the crest. 2 tanks, hurriedly repositioning to meet the unexpected threat from the northeast. Sullivan was scrambling to adjust his defenses, exactly as Harrington had predicted. All Bravo elements, deploy an assault formation, Thompson ordered. Prepare to engage targets on the ridgeline. The tanks of Bravo Company spread out into a wedge formation, maximizing their combined firepower, while presenting a more difficult target array for the defenders. They had the momentum now, and Thompson intended to maintain it. Charlie 6, status update, he requested, wanting to ensure the diversionary withdrawal was still occupying a significant portion of Sullivan's attention. Connor's response came through clearly, despite the sound of ongoing simulated combat. Sullivan's committed 4 tanks to pursuit. We're maintaining a fighting withdrawal, keeping them engaged but avoiding decisive contact. Alpha 6 here, Lewis added. Southern defense remains strong. We've lost 3 tanks, but we're maintaining pressure. The tactical picture was clear. Sullivan had divided his force to meet threats from multiple directions, exactly as Harrington had intended. Now Bravo Company had the opportunity to deliver a decisive blow while the enemy was overextended. Driver, maximum speed, Thompson ordered. All Bravo elements, assault phase begins now. Target enemy command vehicles when identified. Iron Resolve surged forward, leading the charge up the northeastern slope of Copper Ridge. The terrain was challenging, forcing the tanks to navigate carefully despite their haste. One wrong move could lead to a thrown track, or worse, taking a vehicle out of action as effectively as enemy fire. The 2 defending tanks opened fire as Bravo Company came within range, their advanced targeting systems allowing them to engage with remarkable accuracy despite the difficult angles. One of Bravo's tanks registered a hit almost immediately, blue smoke pouring from its turret to simulate a catastrophic kill. Concentrate fire on the leftmost defender, Thompson ordered, designating the target on the shared tactical display. Gunner, load heat. The command was procedural rather than practical in the simulation, but maintaining proper procedures was essential to effective training. Heat loaded, Rodriguez reported, playing his role in the sequence. Target acquired. Fire, Thompson ordered. On the way, Rodriguez confirmed as the laser designator activated. The simulation registered a direct hit on the defending tank, but not a kill. The advanced armor of the M1A2 Abrams could withstand tremendous punishment, even from another Abrams firing high-explosive anti-tank rounds. Hit confirmed. Target still operational, Rodriguez reported. re-engaging. The remaining tanks of Bravo Company joined in, concentrating their fire on the same target. Under such a barrage, even the most advanced armor would eventually fail. After the third simulated hit, the defender deployed blue smoke, acknowledging the simulation of its destruction. "Shift fire to second target," Thompson ordered immediately, unwilling to give Sullivan's force time to adjust. "Driver, continue advance. Get us up that slope." Parker guided Iron Resolve skillfully up the increasingly steep terrain, finding the best path despite the challenging conditions. The tank's powerful turbine engine roared with the effort, pushing the massive vehicle relentlessly forward. The second defending tank managed to score another hit on Bravo Company before succumbing to the concentrated fire, reducing Thompson's effective force to just 6 operational tanks. But they had breached the outer defenses, and the way to Sullivan's command post now lay open before them. As they crested the ridge, Thompson got his first clear view of the command post. 3 tents surrounded by communication vehicles and support equipment, with Sullivan's command tank positioned nearby. The heart of the enemy force, now exposed to direct assault. "All Bravo elements, engage the command post," Thompson ordered. "Priority target is the command tank." Iron Resolve led the charge across the top of the ridge, bearing down on the command post with unstoppable momentum. Sullivan's remaining forces were out of position, still engaged with Alpha and Charlie companies on the other approaches. This was the moment Harrington had planned for, the culmination of a strategy built on misdirection and unexpected angles of attack. Sullivan's command tank began to move, attempting to find a defensive position as Bravo Company closed in. But it was too late. The combined fire of Thompson's remaining tanks registered multiple hits, blue smoke finally billowing from the turret to indicate a catastrophic kill simulation. "Command tank neutralized," Rodriguez confirmed with satisfaction. "The exercise controller is signaling a conclusion." Thompson exhaled slowly, the tension of command beginning to dissipate. They had done it. Despite Harrington's absence, despite Sullivan's technological advantages, they had executed the captain's plan and achieved their objective. "All ironclad elements, cease fire and hold positions," came the order from the exercise controller. "Exercise conclusion confirmed. All units maintain current locations for assessment." As the dust settled across Copper Ridge, Thompson allowed himself a moment of pride. Harrington would have been pleased with how they had adapted his plan to the changing circumstances while maintaining its core principles. The old-school approach, emphasizing maneuver and coordination over pure firepower and technology, had proven its worth once again. But as the adrenaline of command faded, Thompson's thoughts turned to Harrington and his son. The captain's abrupt departure had left many questions unanswered. Thompson hoped that both Harringtons were doing well, that the surgery had been successful, that the family emergency would resolve positively. "Sergeant Thompson," Parker called up from the driver's compartment. "Message from the command post. General Matthews wants to see you immediately." Thompson nodded, mentally preparing himself for the debriefing to come. "Rodriguez, you have the tank. Maintain position until further orders." "Roger that," Rodriguez confirmed. "And Sergeant?" The captain would be proud. Thompson allowed himself a small smile as he climbed down from the turret. "Let's hope so. We still have to convince the brass that the program is worth saving." The command vehicle was a modified Humvee, its interior transformed into a mobile tactical operations center. General Matthews stood over a digital display showing the entire battlefield, colored icons representing the positions and status of all units involved in the exercise. Colonel Sullivan was already present, his expression carefully neutral as Thompson entered and saluted. "Sergeant Thompson reporting as ordered, sir," Thompson said formally. Matthews returned the salute. "At ease, Sergeant. Impressive performance out there. You adapted Captain Harrington's plan effectively when circumstances changed." "Thank you, sir," Thompson responded. "The credit belongs to the captain's training and preparation. We simply executed his vision." Sullivan made a non-committal sound. "Your eastern approach was unexpected. We had anticipated a potential flanking maneuver from the west, but not from both directions simultaneously." Thompson said nothing, letting the results speak for themselves. Sullivan's admission that they had been surprised was vindication enough. "The question remains," Matthews said, turning to face both men, "whether this outcome validates Harrington's training methodology or simply demonstrates the importance of surprise in tactical operations." Sullivan seized the opening. "General, with respect, surprise is a temporary advantage. Once technological superiority reasserts itself, the outcome is inevitable. Had the exercise continued longer, our advanced targeting systems would have ultimately prevailed." "That's speculation," Thompson countered. perhaps speaking more boldly than his rank would normally permit. Captain Harrington's approach emphasizes adaptability precisely because no technological advantage lasts forever. In real combat, the side that adapts faster wins, regardless of who has the better equipment. Matthews considered this, his expression thoughtful. Both perspectives have merit, which is why I've decided to extend the evaluation period for the tank combat training program. Thompson felt a surge of relief. It wasn't a complete victory, but it meant the program would continue, at least for now. Harrington would have another chance to demonstrate its value when he returned. There will be a comprehensive review in 3 months, Matthews continued. Both approaches will be tested against various scenarios. Colonel Sullivan, I expect your full cooperation in this process. Sullivan nodded, professional despite his evident disappointment. Of course, General. May the best methodology prevail. It's not about winning or losing, Colonel, Matthews said sharply. It's about finding the most effective way to prepare our tank crews for the realities of modern combat. Sometimes that means embracing new technology. Sometimes it means remembering fundamental principles that technology can't replace. The rebuke was subtle but clear. Sullivan had approached the exercise as a competition rather than as a learning opportunity. Harrington, despite his old-school reputation, had always emphasized that training was about saving lives, not scoring points. Now, Matthews said, his tone softening slightly, has there been any word about Captain Harrington's son? Thompson shook his head. Not yet, sir. Last we heard, he was going into surgery in Landstuhl. Matthews nodded gravely. Keep me informed. Harrington's a good man, one of the best tank commanders I've ever known. He deserves our support during this difficult time. Yes, sir, Thompson agreed, grateful for the general's concern. It suggested that Matthews saw beyond the politics and rivalries to the human elements that truly mattered. As Thompson departed to the command vehicle, he found Lieutenant Connor waiting outside, her expression questioning. The program continues, Thompson informed her. Extended evaluation period, final decision in 3 months. Connor nodded, relief evident in her posture. And the captain? No news yet, Thompson replied. But the general seems genuinely concerned, which is a good sign for both Harringtons. Connor fell into step beside him as they walked back toward their respective tanks. You know, I was skeptical about some of the captain's methods when I first joined the unit. All that emphasis on map reading and terrain analysis when we have GPS and satellite imagery seemed excessive. Thompson smiled slightly. But today, when the ravines didn't appear on the current maps, exactly, Connor acknowledged, his insistence on understanding the physical terrain, not just the digital representation of it, made all the difference. She paused, then added, I still believe in technology, but maybe there's room for both approaches. That's what the captain has been saying all along, Thompson pointed out. He's never been against technology. He just doesn't want us to become dependent on it to the point where we can't function without it. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a messenger, a young specialist who approached at a jog. Sergeant Thompson, urgent message from headquarters. You're requested to contact Landstuhl Medical Center immediately. Thompson felt his stomach tighten. Such a request could mean anything from the worst possible news to a simple update that required Harrington's second in command. Thank you, Specialist. Where can I make the call? The communications tent is set up, sir. They're standing by for you. Thompson nodded, exchanging a concerned glance with Connor before hurrying toward the indicated location. The communications tent was a hub of activity, with radio operators maintaining contact with units still returning from the exercise area. A satellite phone had been set aside for Thompson's use. He took a deep breath before dialing the number provided, mentally preparing himself for whatever news awaited. After several rings, a professional voice answered. Landstuhl Regional Medical Center, Major Davis speaking. This is Sergeant Michael Thompson, U.S. Army, calling as requested regarding Lieutenant James Harrington, Jr. One moment, please, Sergeant. Captain Harrington asked to be notified when you called. Thompson waited tensely, the seconds stretching into what felt like minutes. Finally, a familiar voice came on the line. Thompson, it's Harrington. The captain's voice sounded weary, but not devastated, which Thompson took as a positive sign. Sir, how is your son? He's out of surgery, Harrington replied. It was touch and go for a while, but the doctors say he'll make a full recovery. Internal bleeding was worse than they initially thought, but they managed to repair the damage. The relief in Thompson's voice was evident. That's excellent news, sir. Everyone here has been concerned. Thank you for that, Harrington said, genuine gratitude in his tone. Now tell me about the exercise. Did Sullivan's fancy technology prevail? Thompson couldn't help but smile at the question. Even with his son in post-operative care, Harrington's mind still partially focused on the mission he had left behind. It was so characteristic of the man that it was almost comforting. Actually, sir, we won, Thompson reported with quiet satisfaction. Your plan worked, with some adaptations for changing circumstances. Sullivan's command post was overrun by Bravo Company, while his forces were divided between Alpha and Charlie. There was a moment of silence on the line, then a sound that might have been a suppressed cheer. Well done, Sergeant. I knew you could handle it. The program has been extended for a 3-month evaluation period, Thompson continued. General Matthews wants to test both methodologies across multiple scenarios. Better than I expected, Harrington admitted. Matthews is a fair man. If we can demonstrate consistent results, he'll back the program regardless of what the technology fetishists want. Thompson hesitated, then asked the question that had been on his mind since the captain's abrupt departure. Sir, when will you be returning? There was a pause before Harrington answered. Not immediately, Thompson. Junior's going to need time to recover, and there are some things a father needs to be present for. I've put in for 2 weeks' leave, which Matthews has approved. Thompson absorbed this information with mixed feelings. He was glad that Harrington was prioritizing his son's recovery, but the captain's extended absence would complicate the ongoing evaluation of the training program. We'll manage, sir, Thompson assured him. The unit performed well today. They'll continue to do so. I know they will, Harrington said with confidence, because they've been properly trained to think, not just to operate equipment. Keep emphasizing the fundamentals, Thompson. Everything else builds on that foundation. Yes, sir, Thompson confirmed. Any other instructions? Just one, Harrington said, his tone becoming more personal. Junior asked me to thank you and the crew. Apparently, he's been following my advice about those terrain guide wheels after all. Said it saved the lives of 2 of his men when the tank overturned. Thompson smiled at this revelation. Glad to hear it, sir. Please give him our best wishes for a speedy recovery. Will do, Harrington replied. Take care of my company, Sergeant. I'll be back before you know it. After the call ended, Thompson stood for a moment processing the conversation. Harrington's son would recover, which was the most important news. The training program had been granted a reprieve, largely due to their successful execution of Harrington's plan, and the captain himself had recognized that his son needed him more than the unit did right now, a rare acknowledgement from a man who had always put duty first. Outside the communications tent, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the desert landscape. The tanks of Ironclad Company were returning to the motor pool, their crews tired but satisfied with the day's performance. Thompson watched them with pride, knowing that each vehicle represented not just a weapons system, but a team of soldiers trained in Harrington's methodology, emphasizing human judgment over technological dependence. Lieutenant Connor approached, her expression questioning. Good news, I hope? The best, Thompson confirmed. Junior's going to make a full recovery. The captain's taking 2 weeks' leave to be with him during the initial recovery period. Connor nodded, genuine relief in her expression. And us? We continue training according to the captain's principles, Thompson said firmly. General Matthews will be evaluating both approaches over the next 3 months. We need to demonstrate that our methodology produces consistent results, not just occasional victories. Sullivan won't give up easily, Connor cautioned. He has too much invested in his approach, too many connections in the Pentagon. We don't need him to give up, Thompson replied. We just need to prove that there's value in our approach. The 2 methods aren't mutually exclusive, as today demonstrated. The most effective solution probably involves elements of both. Connor considered this, then nodded slowly. Integrated training, advanced technology guided by experienced human judgment. That's something even Sullivan might eventually accept. Exactly, Thompson agreed. But first, we need to ensure the tank combat training program survives long enough to evolve. That means excel at every evaluation, every exercise, every opportunity to demonstrate our value. They walked together toward the motor pool, where Rodriguez and Parker were already supervising the post-operation maintenance of Iron Resolve. The tank looked battle-worn but proud, dust coating its angular surfaces like a badge of honor earned in combat. Tech says the right torsion bar is showing wear, Rodriguez reported as Thompson approached. Probably from that high-speed run across the northeastern approach. Nothing serious, but it should be replaced before the next exercise. Thompson nodded, making a mental note. Put in the requisition. I want everything in top condition before the next evaluation phase. Parker wiped grease from his hands with a rag. Word is Sullivan's already requesting a rematch, wants to prove today was a fluke. Let him, Thompson said with quiet confidence. The outcome will be the same as long as we maintain our focus on fundamentals. That's what the captain would expect. As the sun began to set over the desert training grounds, casting the landscape in golden hues, Thompson reflected on the day's events. They had won a significant victory, but the war for the future of tank warfare doctrine was far from over. Sullivan and his technological approach represented a powerful faction within the military establishment, one that viewed traditional methods as outdated and inefficient. Yet today had demonstrated the continuing relevance of Harrington's philosophy. Technology was a tool, not a replacement for human judgment and experience. The most effective warriors were those who could integrate both, using technology to enhance their capabilities while maintaining the skills to function without it when necessary. That evening, the officers gathered in the unit headquarters for an informal debriefing. The atmosphere was relaxed but focused, with junior officers comparing notes on their experiences during the exercise. Thompson listened more than he spoke, observing the interplay of perspectives and insights. Lieutenant Connor had organized the debriefing, demonstrating an emerging leadership style that balanced technical expertise with genuine concern for her soldiers' development. She had clearly absorbed many of Harrington's principles while adapting them to her own personality and approach. The key lesson from today, Connor summarized for the group, is that technological advantages are real, but situational awareness and adaptation remain decisive. Colonel Sullivan's force had better targeting systems, but they became fixated on the threat they expected rather than remaining alert to alternatives. Classic confirmation bias, added Captain Lewis from Alpha Company. They saw what they expected to see, a conventional assault from the south. Everything else was filtered through that assumption until it was too late to respond effectively. Thompson nodded in agreement. That's been Captain Harrington's point all along. Technology can enhance our capabilities, but it can also narrow our perspective if we become overly dependent on it. The human element, judgment, intuition, creativity, remains essential. The discussion continued well into the evening, with officers debating specific tactical decisions and their consequences. It was exactly the kind of thoughtful analysis Harrington had always encouraged, focusing on understanding rather than blame, on improvement rather than justification. As the debriefing concluded, Thompson found himself standing alone at the tactical map, studying the movements that had led to their victory. Each arrow and symbol represented decisions made under pressure, adaptations to changing circumstances, the collective wisdom of soldiers applying their training to a complex problem. "Impressive performance today, Sergeant," came a voice from the doorway. Thompson turned to find General Matthews observing him, the general's expression thoughtful. "Thank you, sir," Thompson responded, coming to attention. "The credit belongs to Captain Harrington's training methodology." Matthews entered the room, gesturing for Thompson to relax. "Perhaps, but methods are only as good as the people applying them. You showed excellent judgment when circumstances changed." Thompson accepted the compliment with a nod. "Sir, may I ask about the future of the tank combat training program?" Today's exercise was just one data point. Matthews smiled slightly at the direct question. "Honest as always, Thompson. You're right, of course. One victory doesn't validate an entire approach." He moved to the map, studying it briefly before continuing. "The extended evaluation will include varied scenarios, different terrain types, multiple objectives. Sullivan will have opportunities to demonstrate the advantages of his technological focus." "And if both approaches show merit," Thompson asked carefully, "then perhaps the future isn't either or, but both and," Matthews replied. "The most effective armies throughout history have been those that successfully integrated new technologies while maintaining fundamental skills. There's no reason we can't do the same." Thompson considered this perspective, finding it aligned with his own thoughts. "That would be the captain's position as well, sir. He's never opposed technology itself, only the tendency to become over-reliant on it." Matthews nodded thoughtfully. "Harrington is an exceptional officer, Thompson. His focus on fundamentals has saved countless lives over the years. But even he must recognize that warfare evolves. The challenge is determining which elements remain constant and which must change." "Yes, sir," Thompson agreed. "Finding that balance is the key." "Precisely," Matthews said with approval. "And that's what the next 3 months will help us determine. Keep your unit sharp, Sergeant. Sullivan will be looking for any opportunity to prove today was an anomaly." "Understood, sir. We'll be ready." After the general departed, Thompson remained at the map, mentally reviewing the day's events once more. The victory had been satisfying, but Matthews was right. One success didn't guarantee the program's future. The coming weeks would require continued excellence, adaptive thinking, and demonstration of the principles Harrington had instilled in them all. Later that night, in the quiet of his quarters, Thompson wrote a detailed after-action report for Harrington. The captain would want to know everything that had happened in his absence, from the tactical decisions to the political implications. Thompson described the day's events chronologically, explaining each adaptation of the original plan and its consequences. He concluded with an assessment of the unit's current status and the challenges that lay ahead during Harrington's absence. Sullivan would certainly regroup, developing counter-tactics specifically designed to overcome the approaches they had demonstrated today. They would need to continue evolving, adapting to each new challenge while maintaining their fundamental principles. As Thompson finished the report, he found himself adding a personal note. "Captain, the men performed admirably today. Your training methodology proved its worth against superior technology, but the most significant development was your decision to prioritize family over duty in a critical moment. That example of balance may ultimately prove more valuable than any tactical lesson. We look forward to your return, but rest assured that your unit will uphold your standards in your absence. Give our best to Lieutenant Harrington, Jr., and tell him there will always be a place for him in Ironclad Company when he's fully recovered." Thompson reread the note, considering whether it crossed professional boundaries. But Harrington had always valued honesty above protocol. The captain deserved to know that his personal decision had made as significant an impression as his tactical teachings. The next morning dawned clear and cool, the desert air crisp before the day's heat began to build. Thompson stood at the motor pool, watching as the tanks of Ironclad Company underwent maintenance checks and repairs. The rhythmic sounds of wrenches turning and engines being tested created a familiar background to the day's beginning. Rodriguez approached, clipboard in hand. "Morning status report, Sergeant. All vehicles operational except Tank 3, which is still undergoing transmission repairs from yesterday's exercise." "Estimated completion time?" Thompson asked, reviewing the detailed maintenance schedule. 1,400 hours, barring complications," Rodriguez replied with professional confidence. "We're prioritizing the stabilization systems and fire control components on all vehicles. If Sullivan pushes for another exercise soon, we'll be ready." Thompson nodded approvingly. "Good. What about the personnel situation?" "All crews at full strength except 2nd Platoon's Tank 4. Specialist Jenkins is on 48-hour medical leave with heat exhaustion from yesterday. Make sure he stays hydrated and follows the recovery protocol," Thompson instructed. "We need everyone at 100% for whatever comes next." As Rodriguez departed to continue the maintenance supervision, Lieutenant Connor arrived, her expression serious. "Message from headquarters, Sergeant. Colonel Sullivan has formally requested another training exercise scheduled for next week. Different scenario, different terrain feature." Thompson absorbed this news without surprise. As expected, he wants to prove yesterday was an aberration rather than a systemic advantage of our approach. "The terrain will be Rolling Hills Training Area," Connor continued, referring to another section of the vast Fort Irwin complex. "More broken ground, less open desert. It negates some of the range advantage of his advanced targeting systems." "Interesting," Thompson mused. "Matthews must have had input on the selection. He's trying to create a balanced test environment." Connor nodded in agreement. "There's more. Sullivan has requested that I be attached to his planning staff as a technical liaison during the preparation phase, ostensibly to ensure fair parameters for both sides." Thompson's eyes narrowed slightly. "More likely to gather intelligence on our methods or to try turning you to his perspective." "My thoughts exactly," Connor confirmed, "but refusing would appear uncooperative and might prejudice Matthews against our approach." "Then accept," Thompson decided after a moment's consideration. "But remember that while you're there to learn, not just to teach. Sullivan's technical approach has genuine strengths we could integrate into our own methodology. The captain has always emphasized absorbing useful elements from any source." Connor smiled slightly at this guidance. "Gather intelligence while protecting our core principles." "Understood." "And Connor," Thompson added as she turned to leave, "Sullivan will try to convince you that technology represents the inevitable future of warfare. That resistance is futile. Remember that humans have been making that argument about every new weapon system since the invention of the crossbow. The fundamentals remain, even as the tools evolve." "I'll remember," she assured him. "After yesterday, I have a much deeper appreciation for the captain's philosophy." Sullivan's technology is impressive, but it didn't win the battle. As Connor departed, Thompson turned his attention back to the maintenance activities, his mind already beginning to formulate approaches for the upcoming exercise. Without Harrington's direct guidance, he would need to anticipate Sullivan's adaptations and develop effective counters. The colonel would certainly avoid making the same mistakes twice. The satellite phone rang in Thompson's pocket, momentarily interrupting his thoughts. He answered quickly, recognizing the international calling code. "Thompson here. It's Harrington," came the familiar voice. "Just received your after-action report. Excellent work yesterday, Sergeant. You adapted the plan effectively when circumstances changed." "Thank you, sir," Thompson responded, gratified by the approval. "How's your son doing?" "Better today," Harrington replied, relief evident in his voice. "The doctors are cautiously optimistic. They're talking about transferring him back to Walter Reed next week if his recovery continues at this pace." "That's good news, sir." Thompson hesitated, then added, "Sullivan has requested another exercise next week at Rolling Hills." General Matthews approved. There was a brief silence on the line as Harrington absorbed this information. Not surprised. Sullivan never could accept defeat gracefully. He'll have analyzed yesterday's engagement extensively, developed counters to the approaches you used. "Yes, sir, we're preparing accordingly." "Rolling Hills is different terrain," Harrington noted thoughtfully. "More cover, shorter sight lines. It neutralizes some of Sullivan's technological advantages." "That's what we thought as well, sir." Harrington was silent for a moment, clearly thinking through the implications. "Sullivan will try to use his superior sensors to locate your force before you can close to effective engagement range. He'll establish interlocking fields of fire covering likely approach routes." "Agreed, sir," Thompson confirmed. "We're developing alternatives to the standard approaches." "Good," Harrington approved. "Remember the fundamentals: terrain masking, electronic discipline, unpredictable movement patterns." "And Thompson?" "Sir?" "Don't try to outthink Sullivan. He's too experienced for that. Instead, create situations where experience matters more than technology. Force him to make human judgments under pressure." Thompson nodded, even though Harrington couldn't see the gesture. "Understood, sir. We'll make it work." "I know you will," Harrington said with confidence. "Keep me updated. If all goes well here, I may be back sooner than expected." After the call ended, Thompson stood for a moment, reflecting on the conversation. Harrington's son was improving, which was the most important news. But the captain's guidance on the upcoming exercise had been characteristically insightful. Create situations where experience matters more than technology. Force him to make human judgments under pressure. That was the essence of Harrington's approach. Not rejection of technology, but recognition of its limitations. Not blind adherence to tradition, but acknowledgement of enduring principles. Finding the balance that maximized effectiveness while minimizing vulnerabilities. As Thompson watched Ironclad Company preparing for the challenges ahead, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. They were not just fighting for victory in a training exercise or even for the survival of a particular program. They were demonstrating a philosophy that balanced human judgment with technological capability, that recognized both the value of innovation and the wisdom of experience. In 2 weeks, Harrington would return to resume command. Until then, Thompson would ensure that the captain's principles continued to guide their preparations and actions. Sullivan and his technological focus represented a significant challenge, but not an insurmountable one. The desert sun climbed higher in the sky, its heat intensifying as the morning progressed. In the distance, the outline of Copper Ridge stood as a reminder of yesterday's victory. But Thompson's focus had already shifted to the next challenge. The next opportunity to demonstrate that in the complex world of modern warfare, the human element remained the most critical factor of all. Iron Resolve had lived up to its name yesterday. The challenge now was to maintain that resolve in the face of Sullivan's inevitable adaptation, to continue evolving while holding true to their fundamental principles. Harrington had built something valuable here, a methodology that recognized the complementary nature of technology and human judgment. Thompson's job was to ensure it survived long enough for the captain to complete its development. With renewed determination, he turned back to the task at hand, preparing Ironclad Company for whatever challenges lay ahead. The rolling hills of Fort Irwin's northern training area took on an otherworldly quality in the pre-dawn light, shadows stretching across the uneven terrain like dark fingers reaching for the last remnants of night. From his position in the commander's cupola of Iron Resolve, Sergeant Mike Thompson surveyed the battlefield that would determine the future of everything Captain Harrington had built. 1 week had passed since their surprising victory at Copper Ridge. 1 week of intense preparation, strategy sessions, and maintenance checks. Colonel Sullivan had spent that time regrouping, analyzing his defeat, and developing counters to the tactics that had proven so effective against his technological advantage. "All elements in position, Sergeant," Lieutenant Connor reported via radio, her voice crisp despite the early hour. "Alpha Company is hull down along the western ridge. Charlie Company reports ready in the southern valley." "Acknowledged," Thompson responded. "Maintain radio discipline from this point forward. Next communication at phase line initiation or enemy contact, whichever comes first." The mission parameters for today's exercise were significantly different from their previous engagement. Instead of a straightforward assault and defend scenario, General Matthews had designed a more complex challenge. 3 objective points spread across the rolling hills terrain, each worth different point values. The force that secured and held the majority of points by exercise conclusion would be declared the victor. The complexity favored Sullivan's technological approach in some ways. His advanced targeting and sensor systems would help him track multiple objectives simultaneously, but it also created opportunities for Harrington's methodology, allowing for deception, misdirection, and exploitation of terrain features that didn't appear on digital maps. "Driver, advance to phase line Bravo," Thompson ordered, signaling the start of their operation. "Standard combat speed." Parker responded immediately, guiding Iron Resolve forward with practiced precision. Around them, the other tanks of Bravo Company followed suit, maintaining proper spacing as they moved across the broken terrain. Thompson had positioned his company to strike at the highest value objective first, gambling that Sullivan would divide his forces to cover all 3. The plan represented a hybrid approach, combining elements of Harrington's traditional methodology with innovations that Lieutenant Connor had suggested based on her observations during her time with Sullivan's planning staff. Rather than rejecting technology outright, they would use it selectively, maintaining traditional skills as a backup and supplement. "Movement detected on the northern ridge," Rodriguez reported from the gunner's position. "Long-range sensors show multiple heat signatures consistent with tank profiles." Thompson raised his binoculars, scanning the indicated direction. The distance was too great for visual confirmation, but the ridgeline offered a commanding view of 2 of the 3 objectives. Sullivan was positioning forces to control the high ground, exactly as expected. "Continue on planned route," Thompson directed. "All elements maintain electronic discipline." Harrington had always emphasized the importance of minimizing electronic emissions in combat. Modern sensor systems could detect radar, radio signals, and even the electromagnetic signature of active targeting systems from surprising distances. By limiting their electronic footprint, they reduced the effectiveness of Sullivan's technological advantage. The sun crested the eastern hills as Bravo Company approached the first objective, designated Objective Alpha. A concrete bunker complex surrounded by defensive positions, it represented a fortified command post in the exercise scenario. According to intelligence, Sullivan had assigned it the lowest priority due to its isolated position away from the other objectives. "No sign of defensive positions," Rodriguez noted as they closed to within visual range. "Objective appears unoccupied." Thompson nodded, unsurprised. Sullivan was concentrating his forces on the higher value objectives, planning to secure those first before addressing Alpha if time permitted. It was a logical approach based on the point values assigned to each location. "Standard security deployment," Thompson ordered as they approached the objective. 2 tanks on overwatch, the remainder clear and secure. The evolution proceeded smoothly, tanks taking up defensive positions while others advanced to clear the objective area. Within minutes, they had secured the location without opposition, placing recognition panels to indicate their control as required by exercise parameters. "Objective Alpha secured," Thompson reported to the company net. "Phase 2 initiation in 5 minutes. Phase 2 represented the critical juncture in their plan. While Sullivan would expect them to move directly toward Objective Bravo, the next highest value location, they would instead split their force. 2 tanks would remain to hold Alpha, while the main body circled through a deep ravine system to approach the highest value objective, Charlie, from an unexpected direction. Thompson checked his watch, counting down the minutes. Timing was crucial. Alpha Company would initiate a diversionary attack toward Objective Bravo at precisely the same moment Bravo Company began their movement toward Charlie. The coordinated action would force Sullivan to divide his attention and resources. "Commence Phase 2, Thompson ordered, as his watch indicated the appointed time. Tanks 3 and 4 remain at Alpha. All other elements form up on Iron Resolve." The tanks moved with a practiced efficiency, taking up their new formation as they departed the secured objective. Thompson directed them toward a narrow ravine entrance half a kilometer east, barely visible unless one knew exactly where to look. Like the ravines at Copper Ridge, this feature didn't appear prominently on current digital maps, giving them an avenue of approach that Sullivan might not anticipate. Alpha 6 reports engagement at Objective Bravo, came the update over the command net. Heavy opposition encountered. Sullivan has committed at least 6 tanks to the defense. Thompson acknowledged the report with grim satisfaction. If Sullivan had committed half his force to Bravo, that left fewer defenders at Charlie. The plan was working so far. The ravine proved narrower than intelligence had suggested, forcing the tanks to proceed in single file with minimal spacing. It was a vulnerable formation, one that would be disastrous if ambushed. But Thompson was counting on Sullivan's focus being directed elsewhere. For 20 tense minutes, they navigated the confined space, tracks occasionally scraping against the rocky walls as they maneuvered through the tightest sections. Finally, the ravine began to widen, the walls falling away as they approached its exit point. "Hold position," Thompson ordered as they neared the end of the protected passage. "Scouts forward to reconnoiter." 2 crew members dismounted, moving cautiously toward the ravine exit to assess the situation before committing the tanks to open ground. Thompson waited anxiously, aware that this moment would determine whether their gambit succeeded or failed. If Sullivan had anticipated their approach and positioned forces to cover the ravine exit, they would be caught in a deadly crossfire with limited ability to maneuver. After 5 long minutes, the scouts returned with their report. "Objective Charlie, visible from exit point, approximately 1 kilometer due west. 2 tanks in defensive positions, hold down on the southern approach. No indication they're aware of our position." Thompson nodded, formulating the assault plan. "We'll deploy an extended battle line as we exit the ravine. Maximum speed to close distance quickly. Concentrate fire on the southern defender first, then shift to the northern position." The crews acknowledged their orders, returning to their vehicles and preparing for the assault. Thompson took a moment to study the terrain through his binoculars, noting the subtle contours that might provide momentary cover during their approach. "Driver, advance," he ordered, settling into the commander's station and securing the hatch. "All elements, prepare to execute on my mark." Iron Resolve emerged from the ravine at combat speed, the other tanks of Bravo Company following in precise formation. As they cleared the confines of the narrow passage, they spread out into an extended battle line, presenting a wider front that would complicate enemy targeting. "Gunner, identify southern target," Thompson directed, designating the defender on his tactical display. "Target identified," Rodriguez confirmed. "Range 900 meters and closing, within effective engagement parameters." Thompson waited until they had close to optimal range before giving the order. "All elements engage designated targets. Fire at will." The simulated battle erupted with surprising intensity. The defending tanks, caught off guard by the unexpected approach from the east, struggled to reorient their turrets to meet the new threat. Bravo Company exploited this momentary advantage, concentrating fire on the southern defender. "Hit confirmed on southern target," Rodriguez reported as the simulation registered a successful engagement. "Mobility kill indicated." "Shift fire to northern target," Thompson ordered immediately. "Driver, continue advance." The northern defender managed to get off several shots as they closed the distance, one round registering a hit on Tank 5 that simulated critical damage. But the combined fire of the remaining Bravo Company tanks quickly overwhelmed the defender, blue smoke billowing from its turret to indicate a catastrophic kill simulation. "Objective Charlie secured," Thompson announced as they rolled into the defensive positions vacated by Sullivan's forces. "Deploy recognition panels and establish defensive perimeter. We hold this position against all counterattacks." The crews worked efficiently, setting up the recognition panels that officially claimed the objective while positioning their tanks to defend against the counterattack that would inevitably come once Sullivan realized what had happened. "Alpha 6 reports heavy engagement at Objective Bravo," came the update from the command net. "They've neutralized 3 enemy tanks but are taking significant casualties. Sullivan appears to be committing his reserve elements." Thompson processed this information quickly. With Sullivan focused on Bravo and unaware they had seized Charlie, they had a brief window to solidify their defensive position before the enemy commander realized his mistake. Status update on Objective Alpha? Thompson requested, wanting to ensure their rear was secure. Alpha remains under our control, came the response. No enemy contact reported. The tactical situation was clear. They had secured 2 of the 3 objectives, giving them a significant point advantage. Sullivan was committing heavily to seize Objective Bravo, unaware that even if he succeeded, he would still be behind in the overall score. But once he realized the situation, he would redirect his forces toward Charlie, bringing his full technological advantage to bear in an attempt to dislodge them. All elements, prepare for heavy counterattack, Thompson ordered. Use terrain features for maximum concealment. Minimize electronic emissions until enemy is within optimal engagement range. The next 30 minutes passed in tense anticipation as they monitored Sullivan's movements through passive sensors. Alpha Company continued to fight a determined holding action at Objective Bravo, gradually giving ground but extracting a heavy toll from Sullivan's forces in the process. It was classic delaying tactics designed to buy time rather than secure victory at that location. Movement detected, Rodriguez reported suddenly. Multiple vehicles approaching from the northwest. Profile matches tank formations. Thompson nodded grimly. Sullivan had finally realized the true situation and was redirecting forces to reclaim the high-value objective. Estimated time to contact? At current speed, 7 minutes, Rodriguez calculated. They're coming fast, not bothering with concealment. They're rushing, Thompson observed. Sullivan knows he's behind on points and time is running short. That works to our advantage. The defending position they had established utilized the natural terrain features surrounding Objective Charlie. 3 tanks were hull down on the northern approach, with 2 covering the west and 2 more, including Iron Resolve, positioned to engage any threat from the south or east. It was a formidable defensive setup, one that would force Sullivan's forces to advance through interlocking fields of fire. Enemy elements entering visual range, Rodriguez reported as the counterattack force crested a distant ridge. 6 tanks in assault formation advancing directly toward our position. Thompson studied the approaching force through his binoculars. Sullivan had committed half his remaining strength to this counterattack, leaving minimal forces to secure Bravo. It was an all-or-nothing gambit, a recognition that Charlie's point value made it the decisive objective. Hold fire until optimal range, Thompson instructed the company net. Let them commit fully to the approach before revealing our positions. The minutes ticked by as Sullivan's force closed the distance, their formation tightening as they approached what they believed to be a lightly defended objective. Through passive sensors, Thompson could detect the electronic emissions from their advanced targeting systems actively scanning for defenders. But Harrington's training in electronic discipline was paying dividends, as their minimal emissions profile provided few returns for Sullivan's sensors. Range 1,000 meters, Rodriguez updated as the attackers continued their approach. Entering optimal engagement zone in 15 seconds. Thompson waited until the lead elements had fully committed to the final approach before giving the order. All elements engage designated targets, fire at will. The simulated battle erupted with devastating intensity. Sullivan's forces, caught advancing in the open against well-prepared defensive positions, absorbed tremendous simulated damage in the opening volley. 2 tanks registered catastrophic kills immediately, blue smoke billowing from their turrets. But Sullivan's forces responded with professional precision despite the surprise, their advanced targeting systems quickly identifying the defending positions and returning accurate fire. One of Bravo Company's northern defenders registered a critical hit, the simulation indicating destruction of its main gun. Concentrate fire on the lead elements, Thompson directed, watching as Sullivan's attack began to falter under the sustained defensive fire. Don't let them establish firing positions. The strategy proved effective. Unable to find cover in the open approach to the objective, Sullivan's counterattack force suffered mounting simulated casualties without significantly degrading the defensive position. After losing 4 of 6 tanks, the remaining attackers began a fighting withdrawal, attempting to break contact and regroup. Maintain fire until they're beyond effective range, Thompson ordered, unwilling to give Sullivan any respite to reorganize his forces. Driver hold position. As the surviving attackers disappeared beyond the western ridge, Thompson allowed himself a moment of cautious optimism. They had repelled the initial counterattack, maintaining control of the high-value objective. According to the exercise parameters, only 30 minutes remained before final evaluation. If they could hold out, victory would be theirs. Alpha 6 reports Sullivan has withdrawn all forces from Objective Bravo, came the update from the command net. They're securing the location now. Thompson nodded in satisfaction. Sullivan had gambled everything on reclaiming Charlie and lost. With both Alpha and Bravo now under ironclad company control, the point advantage was insurmountable, regardless of what happened in the remaining time. All elements, maintain defensive posture, Thompson instructed. Sullivan may attempt one final assault with his remaining forces, but the expected final assault never materialized. Perhaps recognizing the futility of further attacks with his reduced force, or perhaps conserving his remaining strength to minimize the margin of defeat, Sullivan kept his surviving tanks beyond visual range of Objective Charlie for the duration of the exercise. When the control tower announced the conclusion of the exercise, Bravo Company had secured a decisive victory. Control of all three objectives, minimal simulated casualties, and effective execution of a complex battle plan. It was precisely the outcome Harrington would have wanted, a demonstration that his methodology remained relevant even against the most advanced technology. As the tanks of Ironclad Company regrouped for the return to base, Thompson felt a profound sense of satisfaction. They had fulfilled the captain's expectations, preserving his legacy and demonstrating the enduring value of his approach to tank warfare. "Sergeant Thompson," Parker called from the driver's compartment. "Message from the command post. General Matthews requests your presence for debriefing." Thompson acknowledged the summons, directing Rodriguez to oversee the company's return while he reported as ordered. The command vehicle was positioned on a small rise overlooking the training area, providing a comprehensive view of the battlefield. General Matthews stood studying a digital display of the exercise results, his expression thoughtful as Thompson entered and saluted. Colonel Sullivan was already present, his face carefully neutral, despite the decisive defeat his forces had just suffered. "Sergeant Thompson reporting as ordered, sir," Thompson announced formally. Matthews returned the salute. "At ease, Sergeant. Congratulations on another impressive victory. Your adaptation to the multi-objective scenario was particularly noteworthy." "Thank you, sir," Thompson responded. "The company performed exceptionally well." Sullivan cleared his throat softly. "I would be remiss not to acknowledge the effectiveness of your approach, Sergeant. The use of terrain features not fully represented on current digital mapping gave you a significant advantage." Thompson accepted the acknowledgement with a professional nod. "Both approaches have their strengths, Colonel. Technology provides capabilities we didn't have a generation ago, but the fundamentals of terrain analysis and tactical deception remain constant." "Which brings us to the purpose of this meeting," Matthews interjected. "Two exercises, two victories for Harrington's methodology, but more importantly, two demonstrations that the most effective approach likely combines elements of both traditional and technological methods." Sullivan straightened slightly. "Are you suggesting an integrated training program, General?" "Precisely," Matthews confirmed. "The future of tank warfare isn't an either-or proposition. It's finding the optimal balance between technological capability and human judgment." He turned to Thompson. "When does Captain Harrington return from leave?" 3 days, sir," Thompson replied. "His son has been transferred to Walter Reed and is recovering well." Matthews nodded in satisfaction. "Excellent. Upon his return, I want both of you to work with Colonel Sullivan to develop a comprehensive proposal for an integrated tank combat training program, one that preserves the fundamental skills Harrington emphasizes while incorporating the technological advances Sullivan champions." Sullivan's expression revealed mixed emotions, professional recognition of the merit in Matthews' direction, tempered by personal disappointment that his pure technology focus had not prevailed. "Of course, General, I look forward to the collaboration." "Good," Matthews said with finality, "because the Pentagon has authorized a significant expansion of the program based on the preliminary results of these exercises. They're particularly interested in the demonstrated ability to counter near-peer adversaries with advanced targeting capabilities." Thompson absorbed this news with quiet satisfaction. Not only would Harrington's program continue, but it would expand, evolving to incorporate new elements while preserving its core principles. It was a vindication of everything the captain had worked to build over his career. "One more thing, Sergeant," Matthews added. "I received a call from Captain Harrington this morning. He specifically requested that upon completion of today's exercise, regardless of outcome, you be informed of his son's condition." Thompson tensed slightly, uncertain what to expect despite the general's casual tone. "Lieutenant Harrington Jr. is recovering ahead of schedule," Matthews continued with a small smile. "The doctors at Walter Reed are optimistic about a full recovery and eventual return to active duty. The captain asked me to tell you that Junior attributes his survival to the terrain guide wheel modifications you helped develop. Relief washed through Thompson at this news. Thank you for the update, sir. The entire company will be glad to hear it. As the meeting concluded and Thompson departed the command vehicle, he found Lieutenant Connor waiting outside, her expression expectant. Another victory, he informed her with quiet pride, and General Matthews has authorized an expansion of the training program with integration of both methodologies. Connor's eyes widened slightly. So the captain's approach prevailed? In essence, yes, Thompson confirmed, though the program will evolve to incorporate elements of Sullivan's technological focus as well. The general wants us to collaborate with Sullivan on developing the integrated curriculum. That's actually ideal, Connor observed thoughtfully. The best aspects of both approaches combine to create something more effective than either alone. Thompson nodded in agreement. Exactly what the captain has advocated all along. Technology as a tool to enhance human capability, not replace it. They walked together toward the assembly area where Ironclad Company was regrouping after the exercise. The tanks looked battle-worn but proud, dust coating their angular surfaces like badges of honor earned through combat. The crews moved with the confident precision of soldiers who knew they had performed well under pressure. Junior is doing better, Thompson added, sharing the personal news. Recovering ahead of schedule at Walter Reed. Connor smiled at this information. The captain must be relieved. Will he return as scheduled? As far as I know, Thompson confirmed, though I suspect his perspective may have shifted somewhat after this experience. Connor raised a questioning eyebrow. How so? Thompson considered how to express the subtle change he anticipated in Harrington. The captain has always been dedicated to the mission above all else. But choosing family over duty in that critical moment, it changes a man. Priorities shift, not dramatically but meaningfully. Connor nodded in understanding. Like what you were saying about integrated approaches. The best elements of both worlds combine to create something more balanced and ultimately more effective. Exactly, Thompson agreed, impressed by her insight. 3 days later, Captain James Harrington returned to Fort Irwin, stepping off the transport helicopter with the measured movements of a man who had not slept properly in some time. Despite the evident fatigue, his posture remained military straight, his uniform impeccable, the physical embodiment of the standards he had always demanded from others and himself. Thompson was waiting at the landing pad, standing at parade rest until the captain approached. "Welcome back, sir," he said, saluting crisply. Harrington returned the salute, then extended his hand in a rare gesture of personal connection. "Good to be back, Sergeant. I hear you've been keeping Sullivan honest in my absence." Thompson smiled slightly as they shook hands. "Just following your playbook, sir. The company performed exceptionally well." They walked together toward the waiting vehicle, Harrington moving with the deliberate pace of a man conserving energy after an exhausting ordeal. "Junior asked me to thank you personally," he said after a moment. "Said something about you being right about the terrain guide wheel specifications, even when the manual said otherwise." "Just passing along what I learned from you, sir," Thompson replied honestly. "How is he doing?" "Better every day," Harrington said, a father's pride evident beneath his professional demeanor. "Doctors say he'll be back on limited duty within a month, full duty in 3 if the physical therapy goes well." He paused briefly before adding, "He's talking about requesting a transfer to the training command when he's cleared. Says he wants to help teach the next generation what he's learned." Thompson nodded, hearing the subtle shift in Harrington's tone when he spoke of his son. The connection between them had clearly strengthened during the medical crisis. "That's good to hear, sir. He'd be a valuable addition to the program." "Speaking of the program," Harrington said, his tone becoming more businesslike, "General Matthews briefed me on the proposed integration with Sullivan's technological approach. What's your assessment?" Thompson considered the question carefully, knowing Harrington valued honest evaluation above diplomatic phrasing. "It's the right direction, sir. Sullivan's technological focus has genuine strengths that would enhance our approach, particularly in terms of information integration and long-range engagement capabilities. And our emphasis on fundamental skills addresses the key vulnerabilities in his methodology." Harrington nodded thoughtfully. "Balanced integration, using technology to enhance human capability rather than replace it. That's been my position all along, though Sullivan never quite grasped the distinction." "He's beginning to," Thompson observed. The second exercise was particularly enlightening for him. His technology couldn't compensate for poor tactical decisions when we forced him to divide his attention across multiple objectives. They reached the vehicle, a standard military Humvee with the ironclad company insignia on its doors. As they climbed in, Harrington surveyed the familiar landscape of Fort Irwin, his expression reflective. 2 weeks ago, he said quietly, I would have said this program was the most important thing in my life. My legacy after 30 years of service. He paused, gathering his thoughts. Sitting in that hospital room with Junior, watching him fight to recover, I realized how distorted my priorities had become. Thompson remained respectfully silent, recognizing the personal nature of the captain's reflection. The program matters, Harrington continued after a moment. The skills we teach save lives, prepare these young men and women for the realities of combat. But it's not the only thing that matters. He turned to face Thompson directly. I've missed too many moments with my family, Sergeant. Too many birthdays, graduations, Christmases, all in service to the mission. The mission is important, sir, Thompson said carefully. It is, Harrington agreed, but so is balance. That's something I'm only now beginning to understand. He straightened in his seat, his tone becoming more professional again, which is why I've submitted my retirement papers, effective 6 months from now. Thompson couldn't hide his surprise at this announcement. Sir, I thought with the program expansion, the program will continue under capable leadership, Harrington assured him. Yours specifically, I'm recommending you for promotion to lieutenant and appointment as the next director of the Tank Combat Training Program. The unexpected news left Thompson momentarily speechless. Sir, I'm honored, but— No buts, Sergeant, Harrington interrupted firmly. You've demonstrated the leadership, tactical acumen, and adaptability the position requires. The victories against Sullivan confirmed what I've known for years. You're ready for this responsibility. Thompson absorbed this information, the implications settling into place like puzzle pieces completing a picture. And you, sir, after retirement? Walter Reed has offered me a position as a military consultant in their rehabilitation program, Harrington explained, working with wounded warriors, particularly those recovering from combat vehicle injuries, using my experience to help them adapt to their new realities. He smiled slightly. And coincidentally, being within driving distance of Junior's duty station when he returns to active status. The vehicle approached the company headquarters, where the officers and senior non-commissioned officers of Ironclad Company had assembled to welcome their commander back. Thompson could see the genuine respect and affection in their expressions as they spotted the approaching Humvee. Your legacy is secure, sir, Thompson said as they prepared to exit the vehicle. The program will continue to evolve, but its core principles will remain. Harrington nodded in appreciation of the assurance. That's what matters, Thompson. Not that it stays exactly as I designed it, but that it continues to prepare tank crews for the realities of combat in an ever-changing world. He glanced at the assembled company members waiting to greet him. They're the legacy. Every soldier who returns home safely because of what we taught them. Every mission accomplished because they knew how to adapt when technology failed or enemy action disrupted their plans. As they exited the vehicle to the salutes of the waiting company, Thompson realized that Harrington had achieved something truly remarkable. Not just a successful military career or an innovative training program, but the wisdom to recognize when it was time to pass the torch to the next generation. The courage to prioritize family alongside duty, the balance that had eluded him for so many years. The formal welcome back ceremony was brief but heartfelt, with each officer and senior NCO expressing genuine pleasure at the captain's return. Harrington acknowledged their greetings with characteristic efficiency, conveying his appreciation without unnecessary elaboration. Afterward, he addressed the assembled leadership of Ironclad Company, his voice carrying the authority of decades of command experience. The past 2 weeks have demonstrated what I've always known. This company, this program, isn't dependent on any single individual. It's built on principles and methodologies that transcend personality. He paused, making eye contact with each person present. In 6 months, I'll be retiring from active duty. Between now and then, our mission is to develop the integrated training curriculum that General Matthews has authorized. We'll be working with Colonel Sullivan's technical experts to create something more effective than either approach alone. The announcement of his pending retirement caused a ripple of surprise among those who hadn't yet heard the news. But Harrington continued without acknowledging it. Sergeant Thompson will be taking over as program director upon my departure. I expect each of you to give him the same support and professional excellence you've always given me. Lieutenant Connor spoke for the group. We will, sir, and may I say, It's been an honor serving under your command. The lessons you've taught us will continue to guide this company long after your retirement." Harrington accepted this with a brief nod. "The greatest lesson I can offer you isn't about tank tactics or battlefield maneuvers. It's about balance between technology and human judgment, between mission and personal life, between innovation and tradition." He surveyed the assembled officers once more. "Find that balance, maintain it through all the challenges that lie ahead, and you'll succeed not just as soldiers, but as human beings." With that, he dismissed the formation and turned to Thompson. "Let's get to work, Sergeant. We've got 6 months to shape the future of tank warfare doctrine, and I intend to make every day count." As they walked together toward the headquarters building, Thompson reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From the desperate battle at Copper Ridge to the vindication at Rolling Hills. From Harrington's abrupt departure to his return with renewed perspective. It was a story of adaptation, of evolution, of finding the proper balance between seemingly opposing forces. Iron resolve remained at the core of everything they did. The determination to prevail against all obstacles, to maintain core principles while adapting to changing realities. But now that resolve was tempered by wisdom, by recognition that strength came not just from unyielding purpose, but from thoughtful integration of diverse approaches. The desert sun climbed higher in the cloudless sky, casting sharp shadows across the training grounds of Fort Irwin. In the distance, the silhouette of Copper Ridge stood as a reminder of challenges overcome, of battles won through the application of fundamental principles rather than blind reliance on technological advantage. A new day had begun, bringing with it fresh challenges and opportunities. But for the men and women of Ironclad Company, the path forward was clear. They would continue to evolve, to adapt, to find the optimal balance between technology and human judgment. And in doing so, they would honor the legacy that Captain James Harrington had built over 3 decades of dedicated service. Not by rigid adherence to tradition, nor by uncritical embrace of innovation, but by thoughtful integration of the best elements of both approaches. By maintaining the iron resolve that had defined them, while recognizing that true strength sometimes came from knowing when to bend rather than break. The future of tank warfare would be shaped by this understanding, by the recognition that in the increasingly complex battlefield of the modern era, success depended not on choosing between human experience and technological capability, but on harnessing both in perfect harmony. And as Thompson walked alongside the mentor who had guided him for so many years, he felt ready to carry that understanding forward, to build upon the foundation Harrington had established, to ensure that the next generation of tank commanders would benefit from the wisdom of those who had gone before while embracing the possibilities of what lay ahead. Iron resolve, balanced by wisdom, strengthened by experience, guided by unwavering commitment to preparing young soldiers for the harsh realities of combat. That was Harrington's true legacy, and Thompson would ensure it endured long after the captain had departed for his well-earned retirement. The story of Copper Ridge would be told for years to come, a testament to the enduring truth that in warfare, as in life, the human element remained the most critical factor of all. Technology would continue to evolve, offering new capabilities and advantages. But without the judgment, intuition, and adaptability that only humans could provide, even the most advanced systems would ultimately fall short. Harrington had understood this truth when few others did, had built his career and his training methodology around it. And now, as he prepared to pass the torch to the next generation of leaders, he could do so with the confidence that this essential understanding would not be lost. As they reached the headquarters building, Harrington paused, looking back at the assembled tanks of Ironclad Company gleaming in the morning sun. "They're magnificent machines," he said quietly, "but it's the men and women who crew them that make the difference." Thompson nodded in agreement, understanding that this simple truth lay at the heart of everything they had fought to preserve. "And always will, sir. That's one thing that will never change, no matter how technology evolves." Harrington smiled slightly, satisfied that his legacy was in capable hands. Then he straightened, his expression becoming more businesslike. "Now let's see these integration proposals Sullivan's team has developed. I suspect they'll need significant revision before they're ready for implementation." Together, they entered the headquarters building, ready to begin the next phase of their mission. The battle for Copper Ridge was over, but the work of preparing the next generation for the challenges that lay ahead continued. And in that ongoing effort, The iron resolve that defined Captain James Harrington and those he had trained would continue to make all the difference.